Welcome to VERSED, the Ascap podcast. I'm Eric Philbrook. Voting is now underway for the 73rd Annual Primetime Emmy Awards. And this year, 19 songwriters and composers from our global Ascap family are nominated for their phenomenal work. In this episode, we'll talk to two of this year's nominees. I had the pleasure of speaking with the great composer Michael Abels, who is best known for his scores for Jordan Peele's Oscar-winning film Get Out, as well as Us, and who is nominated for 2 Emmys this year for his music to the acclaimed HBO docuseries Allen vs. Farrow. Then, later, Eitan Rosenblum talks to Billie Eilish's music director, Aaron Forbes, who is nominated for 2 Emmys for his work on the Apple TV film Billie Eilish, The World's a Little Blurry. But first, to get a little more insight into this year's Ascap Emmy Award nominees, I am pleased to introduce the Senior Director of Creative Services for Ascap's Film, TV, and Visual Media Department, my colleague and friend, Jennifer Harmon. Hey, Jennifer. Thanks for joining us. It's that time of year again. In your world, especially, Emmy Award season, and Ascap members are riding a wave of nominations. How is our family of composers and songwriters looking this year?
We're doing great, Eric. We have 19 members nominated this year for a total of 21 nominations.
And for those who may not know, how does the Emmy nomination process work? Who actually nominates our composers?
Well, you have to submit first to be considered. So programs and individuals are submitted to the Television Academy for consideration. And then for the music branch in particular, there's a peer group that does that review. So essentially, you're looking at an award show that is focused on your own peers recognizing your accomplishments.
Of course, we love all of our members and wish them all well this award season. Who are some of the notable Ascap members up for awards?
Well, I think we have to lead with our 2 members that each are carrying 2 nominations. So Bo Burnham is doing really well this year with his show Inside that aired on Netflix, has nominations for both music and lyrics and outstanding music direction. And Michael Abels, who will be joining us later, has 2 nominations as well. His are for outstanding music composition for a documentary series or special, and outstanding original main title theme music. And these nominations are both for Allen versus Farrow.
Right. A very engaging and captivating documentary this year, for sure.
Yeah, and Michael has a history of working with Jordan Peele. So this is an interesting transition for him, and we're really excited for him. But I also want to throw a little tip of the hat to Martin Phipps, who's coming in for his 6th Emmy nomination. And this is his 2nd time being nominated for his work on The Crown.
Oh, yeah. Great show. How important is an Emmy Award to a composer's career? Beyond just being honored to be in the running and to actually win one, does it really open doors for a composer or songwriter?
I think any of these peer-nominated awards do provide that extra level of shine and acknowledgement that gets the attention of studios, not only in the US, but around the world. It is that mark of success that can open doors.
And speaking of opening doors, Ascap does so much to support our film and TV and video game composer members. Our film and television scoring workshop, for instance, is just one example. Can you share maybe a really good, example of an Ascap member who has come through our program or one of our programs who has gone on to nab an Emmy nomination or an award?
Sure. Well, I think we can take the lead with Jim Dooley, who went through our Ascap film scoring workshop many years ago and went on to win an Emmy for Pushing Daisies, which still has an active fan base that's begging for a reboot.
So we've done a lot of...
I have 2 others I could throw at you, Eric.
Yeah, go ahead.
I also wanted to acknowledge Rob Duncan, who has 4 Emmy nominations, went through our film scoring workshop as well. And his Emmy nominations date back to his work on Castle in 2009. But then there's also Bear McCreary, who went through our electronic scoring workshop, which was the sister program for some time to the regular scoring workshop that we were doing. And now he has 4 Emmy nominations and 1 win for Da Vinci's Demons. So
Wow.
it's been, we've had a good crop of success coming through that program.
Absolutely. And Bear is hugely successful now. So we've been very busy this summer programming our Ascap Experience sessions, and we've had a lot of film and TV music content. Most recently, we featured Joel Beckerman, John Powell, Pinar Toprak, Siddhartha Khosla in a session called "What Every Film and TV Composer Needs to Know About the Business." And it's so wonderful that our successful members give back to the community in this way. How valuable is this sort of content for young composers just starting out?
It's important for young composers to hear from composers at every stage of their career. I think John Powell and Pinar Toprak are reaching great levels of success, but they're not so far into their careers that they forget what it's like to be just starting out and figuring it out, wondering, how do I succeed? How do I move forward? How do I get connected to the right people? The more stories you hear from people at that level, the more attainable it all seems. And really, every composer can be just one project away from success. So the more knowledge they gain now, the better.
So you've worked at Ascap in our film and TV music department for many years. You were very close with so many, composers in our community. How does it feel to be part of that community and to know that you are really like someone in their corner that they truly, lean on and look to for support as they kind of move their way through this business?
It's been a pleasure to get to know our composers. I started at Ascap as an assistant and worked my way up and acquired lots of knowledge along the way. And I really enjoy imparting that knowledge to our members because I think that stress comes from lack of information. So the more that I can support our members and explaining the process of how Ascap works, the better. But then outside of that, being involved with all of our educational programs and knowing that wisdom that I'm helping to have shared with them is actually impactful maybe the next day. I'm just happy to be part of this team and do what we do, supporting composers every day.
Well, we are so happy that you are part of our team, Jennifer. And, I've met so many ASCAP composers over the years. They are a wild bunch. And it's great to be able to elevate their role in the film making process, because they're certainly a huge part of all these great films and TV shows and video games that we enjoy these days. So to get to know some of them is really, really a pleasure.
Absolutely.
And I'll let you get back to what you need to do today. And thanks again for chatting with me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Eric.
Michael Abels is best known for his scores for the Oscar-winning film Get Out and for Jordan Peele's Us, for which Abels won the World Soundtrack Award, the Jerry Goldsmith Award, a Critics' Choice nomination, an Image Award nomination, and multiple Critics' Awards. The hip-hop influenced score for Us was shortlisted for the Oscar and was named Score of the Decade by online publication The Wrap. Michael is also co-founder of the Composers Diversity Collective, an advocacy group whose aim is to increase visibility of composers of color in film, game, and streaming media. As a concert composer, he has received grants from the National Endowment for the Arts and Meet the Composer, and his orchestral works have been performed by the Chicago Symphony, the Philadelphia Orchestra, and many others. This year, Maestro Abels is nominated for 2 Emmys for his musical world-building on the HBO docuseries Allen vs. Pharaoh. I recently talked to him about his first experience scoring a documentary, the mission of the Composers Diversity Collective, his other gig as a concert composer, and the joys of working with a wildly creative kindred spirit such as Jordan Peele. Here is my conversation with the great Michael Abels. So welcome, Michael, to Verse, the ASCAP podcast. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Great to be here, Eric. Thanks for having me.
I had the pleasure of seeing your work performed live at the Ascap Screen Awards in 2018 with that beautiful choir that you brought. So it's an honor to speak to you in person. Since that time, you've obviously stayed very busy. You've not only did you have great success with Jordan Peele's Get Out, but also the follow-up work that he did with Us. You've won many awards. You've been nominated for many awards, and this year you're nominated for 2 Emmys for Allen versus Farrow. So I guess my first question is, how did you get involved in that project, and what were your musical goals for that work?
Oh, well, I was contacted by the directors, Kirby Dick and Amy Ziering, and had known them for a couple of years, and we had wanted to work together, and the timing hadn't worked out. And they hadn't, when I first met them, they hadn't even mentioned Allen versus Farrow, even though it was clearly already something they were working on. But when it came time for music, they got in touch with me, and I thought, sure, absolutely, I would love to try this. So that's how I became involved. My musical goals, first of all, was to figure out how to do a documentary. I hadn't done one, and I didn't want to, assume that I knew how to do it. But beyond that, it was to the documentary. It's actually a multi-part. There's 4 episodes because the story is so. There are so many aspects to it, and especially in the way that Kirby and Amy researched and covered it. And so there's some parts of it are a love story, the love story between Mia and Woody, and some parts of it are a family drama, and Dylan's story growing up in her very large family, and the memories she has as a kid, both the very unsettling ones and the joyful ones. And then there's also an investigation, and there's a tabloid drama. Excuse me. And then there's a tabloid drama. So there are many facets to the story, and I wanted to be able to provide a score that gave each part of that story what it needed, but then also brought all of those aspects together.
So in many ways, these were, as you said, several stories in one project, with a lot of emotion, a lot of drama, a lot of challenges in terms of striking the right tone, the right mood for each episode, or each story within that episode. So were you given a free rein to sort of come up with your own approach in terms of instruments or the style of the music, or how much liberty did you have to explore that?
Well, they really trusted me to just jump in with both feet and do what it is that I do. So I really appreciated that, and that was part of what made me want to work with them. But they also, not only Kirby and Amy have a really close creative relationship, but they also work with their team of editors, and together the 5 of them are kind of a creative family, or a writer's room, or whatever you would call it. And they're all very invested in finding the right tone of the story. Of actually, in documentary, you don't actually know what the story is going in. You may have a broad arc of a story, but a lot of times the story reveals itself in the interview process and in the process of the footage that you have. And so they clearly, as I was watching them debate music as if I wasn't there sometimes on our Zoom calls we'd have, I would see and hear them talking about what the story was and what the important thing to take away from a certain sequence or scene was. And therefore, they would have their opinions about the music would be informed by what they thought the story was. And they would ask me sometimes what I thought the story was, or if not the story, the emotional the emotional arc through the scene, let's say. And so while they gave me free rein to go first, they also gave me a lot of feedback about what was working and what wasn't. And that helped me find the things that were working and helped me integrate the different aspects of the story, as I mentioned before.
Right. So getting nominated for an Emmy, you're nominated for 2 Emmys for this project. You've won some very prestigious awards. You've been nominated many times. How does it affect, how you see the arc of your career when you get nominated or get recognized with awards such as this?
Well, these are my first Emmy nominations, that's for sure. So I'm thrilled. I'm really thrilled, and my daily life has not changed one bit. But in any of the arts, what is quality work is something that first of all, you have to believe in yourself above all, or you're not able to create quality work. And that's the thing that you have to have an innate sense of what quality is for you to be able to produce it and be self-critical in a way that keeps yourself to a high standard, but at the same time is generous with your creative spirit. And I think that that's one of the first things that an artist has to learn to do in order to become who they are. But also, what is quality work in the world is judged very much in the opinion of others. It's not something where there's a general consensus. And if a piece of music moves you, the fact that I don't like it makes no difference whatsoever to you. That music that music belongs to you. It belongs to your heart and your soul and the emotion it causes for you. So and to be nominated for an award is to say that your peers acknowledge and hear you and see the work that you're doing and respect it. And that's really, it's very flattering, and it's inspiring, and it means, okay, what I'm doing is not falling on deaf ears. I'm being heard, and I'm making a contribution, and that's what I'm here to do. So it means a lot to me for those reasons.
There was a time when a composer such as yourself, if you had the kind of success that you had with a film like Get Out, and Us, on a big mainstream level like that you wouldn't take a documentary job like this. But would you say that there are more opportunities now for composers at any level to sort of do what they wish, follow their muse, follow their heart into the projects that really appeal to them?
Yeah, I think that, the whole entertainment world and the structures of what is, the right thing to do, or all of that has been completely scrambled over the last few years in so many different ways. Documentaries are going through a tremendous renaissance, I think. I think the streaming world has caused what we think of as television to go through an incredible renaissance of its own. There have been huge, thanks to films like Get Out and Black Panther and Crazy Rich Asians and Coco, there's been a huge opening up in understanding diversity, that diversity can be not only just good for the soul, but good for the box office. And so there are more opportunities, I think, for creatives, no matter what your craft is, than there ever have been. But I think what that also means is that there's no wrong way to approach your career, I don't think. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what your career is, you have to like the people you're working with. And that's the bottom line. If you're enjoying your job every day, it's not just because you're being creatively fulfilled, it's because you appreciate the people you get to interact with. And so Kirby and Amy are amazing filmmakers, and they very much believed in my work. And so that to me seemed like a great opportunity for a collaboration. And you can, if you only take jobs based on what someone tells you is the next thing you should do, to me, that's not the right way. You have to go with what your heart and what your gut tells you to do.
Right. So just rewinding the clock a little bit, before you got the assignment to work with Jordan on Get Out, were you in contact with him? Did he, like, how did he end up, reaching out to you specifically to do this project with him?
Well, before meeting Jordan, I had most of the music I'd written was concert music. I had done some TV and radio commercials like right out of school, but in terms of traction in the industry, I really hadn't found any. So I had gotten some concert commissions, and I had done those as I'd had them, and I was also teaching. And so I would balance these two facets of my professional life. But a couple of my orchestral pieces are on YouTube, and they had, dozens of hits, as that sort of music might. But one of those turned out to be Jordan Peele, who at the time was known for Key and Peele. And he had gotten his first job as a director with Blumhouse for a script he had written. Right. And he was looking for, what people didn't know about him at the time was that he was a huge fan of suspense and horror, and not just a fan, but he was a student of it and had seen basically every significant suspense and horror film ever and understood what made those films work. And so he was very influenced by the music of films that used 20th century kind of concert music as their soundtrack. Some films have used pieces by Penderecki and Ligeti and others as their soundtrack because that music is dissonant and evocative and terrifying. So he wanted someone who could write in that language and was familiar with that, but he also wanted someone who could get the African-American experience. And so in that regard, he was kind of looking for me. So when he saw a piece of mine online that, resonated with him, he actually had the post-production supervisor hunt me down and just cold call me, which is so unusual in Hollywood. I can't even tell you, but it just goes to show you how fearless Jordan is about his aesthetic, about being creative and being willing to step out. So I got a cold call from a producer, and they sent me the script. They sent me what was to be the Oscar-winning script for Best Original Screenplay, just cold. And then it was an amazing, of course. And I met Jordan, and he's amazing, of course. And so that's how that began.
Well, certainly Get Out made a splash, and it really presaged a conversation about race in this country that would only intensify in the months and the years that came afterwards. At what point did you co-found the Composers Diversity Collective? Was it prior to this time period? Was it in response to sort of what was happening at that time, or?
Well, it was with the success of Get Out, I suddenly started going to industry events and meeting other composers in the media field. And we would, composers of color, we would see each other and go, "Hey, I see you, and what's this like for you? And we should hang out sometime." And finally, after saying we should hang out sometime enough, a couple of us realized, what we got to do is just say, we're going to hang out, and here's where, and here's when. And so, you're invited. And I thought we'd have about 10 people. Well, we had 50. Wow. And which I think just goes to show that there was, when there's intention, things happen. And we've been around 3 years now, and we're there to solve the problem for people in the industry who say, I want to be more inclusive, but I just don't know anybody. They're not in my contact list. And we're here to say, here we are. If you're interested in increasing your diversity and inclusion profile, check us out at composersdiversitycollective.org, and we will fill up your contact list with composers from all around the world of every culture and background who write every style of music. And the industry is responding to us, and they're coming to understand that we're a resource. And we've also developed a huge community of our own, upon which we can look to, to help each other out. And those of us who are more senior composers, if we're looking to hire someone, we have a body of people who we can consider hiring. And it's really been a benefit and blessing to my life.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that, and kudos to you for being a part of that change, that has been so long overdue in not only the film industry, but in many industries and across the country. I wanted to speak to you a little bit about your journey from being a young musician to going to USC for music school. Music education is so vital. There are so many homes across this country with a piano in the living room, and just tell me a little bit about what made the difference in your life in terms of learning how to play the piano, but then taking it to the next level, and what was sort of the wind at your back that kind of pushed you forward through all this.
Well, the first thing actually really literally was the piano in the living room. I'm glad you brought that up, because my grandparents, who were raising me when I was very young, they were on a farm, but they had a spinet in the living room. And I just assumed as a toddler that, well, everybody plays the piano because there was a television in the living room and everybody watched that. So, I was trying to play Do Re Mi because that was my favorite song when I was 4, and I wasn't able to do it, surprisingly. So I asked my grandmother, I want to play Do Re Mi. Why does it sound bad? And she said, well, you have to take lessons. And I said, well, then I want, sign me up. And so she did. So she bothered the local piano teacher that she had to take me on at age 4, which was younger than she preferred, I guess. But that was the start of that. And I loved music. It just spoke directly to my soul. And I just thought it was also a fascinating puzzle, that you could just like that song says, that you could rearrange the notes in any order you wanted, and it could create a whole new world for you. So between just my love of that, the sort of mental challenge and the emotional reaction that I would have as a result of that, it seemed like just a lifelong, something that I could always have interest in, because I could just rearrange. If I got bored, I could just rearrange the blocks in some other order.
Right. Did you see a career path, spread out in front of you, or did you have any idea like what you really wanted to do, or were you just kind of keeping an open mind, and wherever the music took you, that's where you would go?
I wanted to be a composer from a very early age. I tried to write my first piece of music at age 8, and I got stuck after the first line, and I lost interest. But then when about 13, I tried again, and then I had was a little older, was able to stick with it through writer's block and kind of get through that. And then once I had the sense of completion after going through that, then I was hooked on that, because I felt so proud of myself that I had stuck that out and I had created something. And I was also fascinated by different genres of music, just like, why does country music sound the way it does versus jazz or concert music? And I think it was because, I don't know why, but I just thought that was fascinating. So I would try to write, if I heard a song or piece of music that I liked in a certain style, then I would try to write something in that style. Part of out of fascination, but part of out of learning, if you can write in a style, you have to understand how it works. So therefore, that was my way of understanding from my own self what made that style work. So out of doing that, I always imagined myself writing every style of music. And I saw, I was very inspired by John Williams, of course, because he could write in so many different styles, even though, he's thought of as a very specific style. But then also Quincy Jones, who's just so unbelievably versatile in all the different styles of music he does. And all the different, Leonard Bernstein I was very inspired by, and then different artists that I would hear, like progressive rock, where they were able to both have it be rock, but also explore different time signatures and things like that. Like the music that crossed over was always catching my attention, I think. So those are the things that kept me. So I didn't know if I was going to be, I was all for being a film composer, but I was also all for being a concert composer. I was all for being a songwriter if that's where I had had success. I just like, if there was a gig and a chance to write music, I was wanting to do that.
Right. So speaking of concert music, so you've been commissioned to write music for some of the nation's best symphonies and orchestras, and you've conducted as well. What do you enjoy about, getting out into the world outside of the, your studio, to obviously not in the last year, but to do this, to satisfy this part of your musical identity?
Well, when I'm writing concert music, I'm still in the same room I'm talking to you from now. The place I'm sitting is no different than when I'm doing film music. But I'm a musician. I play the piano, but not nearly at the level of someone who plays in an orchestra, plays their instrument. I consider orchestral musicians and musicians who play in bands to be like Olympic athletes, really. They're at the top of an incredibly difficult physical game.
Right.
And so out of that, I think part of the music I write involves me, it's most important to me that musicians enjoy playing the music that's written for them. I think when a musician says they enjoy playing a piece I've written, that's the highest compliment to me. So this sort of implied relationship between a composer and a musician, I think is a really important part of my music. And so when I go and I get to experience that, it's a kind of a spiritual experience, really, because the best music that you write, I think, is not really, it doesn't feel like you're writing it. It feels like it's just there and you're just transcribing it. It comes through you rather than from you. But at the same time, it's still just what I do is I just make blueprints of music. I make a blueprint of what music would be like if you were a musician and you were gonna actually make music. So the musicians take the blueprints and they breathe life into it with their abilities. And so to hear them do that, and they always, the most exciting part is the part that the musician adds to the music that is not on the page, the part that comes directly from their soul. And so it's for that moment when the music comes to life with their voice that I just feel like I'm just the luckiest person in the world.
That's wonderful. So I understand you are, or will be, or are working with Jordan Peele again on a new project. How does it feel to have a collaborator such as Jordan, whom you've worked with, several times now? How does it feel to be able to have that sort of relationship with a film director, a storyteller, with whom you've had success and with whom you have a creative spark with?
Well, it's great because there's a history of having solved creative problems together before. Mm-hmm. And there's an understanding of what he likes. I know how to filter my ideas through my Jordan Peele perspective, which is something that I've developed over watching him work. But also, he doesn't, he really challenges himself. He does not, I would be very surprised if he ever did a sequel to one of his own ideas. And all of the films that he's directed so far are ones that he's written himself. And I'm sure he's passed up opportunities to do either sequels to his own work or to be the highly paid director of someone else's work. And the fact that and they've probably backed a truckload of money up to his house to entice him to do that.
Right.
So the fact that he's chosen not to do that, I really noticed that. And so when I see the different projects that he just writes purely out of thin air, you know, these projects that he dreams up that are very much, they're terrifying, but they're also multicultural, and they're also kind of all of the same universe and yet all different. I just have huge respect for the path that he's blazing for himself. And so for me to be one of his trusted collaborators, it always means that I really have to step up my game. You know, I don't want to ever, he expects to be surprised and challenged, but he's doing that to himself. And so he expects that from the people he works with. And so I feel grateful for the connection, but I also really feel like I want to impress him and want him to feel like I'm the right choice for his project. So,
well, you certainly impress everyone in your Ascap family. We appreciate you being a member of our family. You know, congrats on all your success, and good luck on Emmy night. And we certainly look forward to you know, new music coming down the pike from you. So thanks again for joining us today, Michael.
Eric, I am a very proud and lifetime Ascap member, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
We're finishing up this episode with some sound advice from another of this year's Emmy-nominated Ascap members. Have you ever marveled at how your favorite artist translates the sound of their studio album for the live stage, whether it's an arena show or an SNL performance or a live stream? Figuring that out is one of the many roles of a music director. MDs tend to fly under the public's radar, but they can have a huge impact on how you experience music. To find out more about what a music director does and what you need to become one, we called up Ascap member Aaron Forbes. He's a multi-platinum songwriter, producer, and MD, who's worked with Olivia Rodrigo, Conan Gray, Banks, Halsey, and more. Aaron is best known for his long tenure as music director for Billie Eilish and Phineas. He's currently nominated for 2 Primetime Emmys for the Billie Eilish documentary, The World's a Little Blurry, where you can hear his sterling work as both an MD and a sound mixer. Here's Aaron Forbes in conversation with ASCAP's Eitan Rosenblum.
Aaron Forbes, welcome to ASCAP's VERSED podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So congratulations on your 2 Emmy nominations. How does it feel? How did you react when you found out?
Super shocked. Like, I mean, very, very, very surprised. It was not on the radar, never been something that I even thought was a possibility, being somebody who's just in music my whole life. Yeah, I mean, I was literally just sitting on the couch having coffee, and Elmo, the dub mixer who I worked with, called me freaking out, and then my phone just started blowing up because I guess it all, you know, got announced, and yeah, it's just super surprised, man. Like really, really blown away.
So one of your nominations was for you as a music director, of course, for the Billie Eilish doc. And I know there's a lot of confusion, even just within me, about what exactly a music director does. Like, it seems
Sure.
like it can encompass so many things depending on what artist you're talking about or what the context is. So could you just give a general sense of the scope of what a music director might do?
Sure. I mean, you're not alone. And I think that that's in part to a lot of things that are just interesting about maybe COVID being the great accelerator of many things. You know, I think if you looked at what a music director did when I was a kid coming up and wanting to be on the road, and I'm a guitar player first, and the first thing I did was get on a gig, and I happened to be the music director for it. You know, that version where you're a part of the band, you put the band together, you play on stage, you kind of are the live producer of how it sounds, you know, like what parts are, you know, extensions and transitions and all that stuff. I think that's the prerequisite kind of baseline of what a music director has been or was. And then now you're getting layers and layers of just deeper reach into places that I never would have imagined we would, you know. In case in point, working on this documentary, But in a lot of ways, it makes a ton of sense. So yes, for Billy's live shows, I will work with Andrew, the drummer. We'll talk through drum parts and ideas of like, how do we heighten the music a little bit more in certain sections? And also Billy loves it to feel like and sound like the record. So how do we make sure it's just like the record, and then find little moments to make it, ooh, that's exciting. That's, you know, programming and all the really interconnected wild stuff that we're capable of doing now, with MIDI and whatnot. I mean, building patches for Phineas that are literally the patches he used on the album, putting them just into main stage and having that all ready to go. And then, yeah, now, you know, through COVID and even before that, I've been seeing a change for the past 5 years, I think, is really kind of the turning point, where music directors often don't travel with the band. They build a show and send it out, and check in on it. And it's like, I'm there for late night, I'm there for SNL, I'm there for those big, you know, performances where it's really important that we are making sure that everything goes the way that we know the artist, you know, to our best knowledge, wants it to sound and to feel. So that a broad stroke thing, I guess, if that helps at all, you know, as to what it is. And I guess now even further with a lot of, you know, everything going to late night, you know, being pre-record, like doing tapings and stuff. And I actually mix every single thing that is going to be a performance for, you know, like on our Instagram or YouTube or something. It's like, you know, ultimate curation, trying our best to give any artists that we work with the best presentation that we think that they would like, you know.
So I know that you have fulfilled so many roles for a lot of the artists that you work with. So like I know you co-wrote a song with Billy and Phineas, and
right.
You produced, you're a session musician, touring musician, effective band leader, and you talked about all the tech work that you have to do.
Sure.
Would you say that the music director role is sort of like complementary to all of that, or necessarily involves all of that?
Yeah, you know, I mean, to me, it's kind of it all stems from the same place. As if you think about a music director as a live music producer, it you know, then it kind of makes sense, because to me, it feels kind of like the same muscle. You know, you're still gathering information about what somebody's taste may be. You know, you're paying attention to their body language. I mean, I spend most of my time really just read the room, see what it feels like. You know, somebody could say yes to you, but their body says no. And then you just know that the answer is no. And you just kind of go a different direction. Say, well, what about this? I don't know if that's any different. It's like, you know, if we're working on something and in a room, in a rehearsal space, and it's not quite working, it's not that different than if I'm sitting here and somebody's on the couch and we're working on a song and they're not feeling it. That feels like the same sort of interaction to me, where you're just picking up on a vibe and going, cool, like what's going to make this work for you? You know, it's a very, very, very similar thing, which I think is for me why, you know, it's like, you know, like one of the first artists that I did a lot of that for was Banks, where it's like we work on an entire album together. And then I'd be like, well, let me help you put this into a live show, because it's going to be easy for me, because I know easier for me, I guess, to take what exists here and help translate it to a live situation, you know. And I love that. I love like end to end. You know, it's like I want to get my hands dirty. I'm obviously probably too type A, but it's like I want to get my hands in it. I love the idea of creating something and mixing it and delivering it and being like, cool, you know. And I also love handing something off. Don't get me wrong. I really love that too, having incredible people that we work with all the time. But a full end-to-end type project is very, very exciting. Like the documentary, where, you know, I got to music direct a documentary that covered 5 years of content that I music directed, which is this kind of like really weird, you know, meta out there concept. But to do that and then mix it and deliver it is just a freaking cool experience, you know. I've been thinking a lot about how to answer the question of what is a music director to a documentary. And think that I was doing an interview and it kind of got flipped and it made a lot more sense. And it's, if you think about it, just as, I think this is an English language thing, which I don't know, like maybe you can shed some light on this. If you say director of music, all of a sudden it kind of makes more sense. And I don't know why that is, but in the film, in the context of film, it does, because you're coming in as an advocate for the music. And my whole thing was, how do I advocate for the tone, the vibe, all the things that, again, this vault of knowledge that I've collected from Billy and Phineas, how do I advocate on their behalf within this documentary that their music that they work so hard on comes across in this, documentary format in a way that they would love too. There's ways that they want their music to be heard. They want the bass to be way louder than most people are comfortable with. There's parts of songs with Billy that are really important to her, that they like the background vocals super loud, like all these like little finite little bits of knowledge. But, I know that going into that, it's going to make her more excited when she watches it and feels good about, this very telling documentary that's, not filtered at all.
So let's talk a little bit in more detail about The World's a Little Blurry, which earned you your 2 Emmy noms. So I think I understand where the sound mixing part comes in. Right. What I imagine you were doing a lot of that in post.
Yeah, that was, we can touch on the sound mixing really quick. It was a very deep dive. It was collecting, archived hard drives of live performances from our front of house person, from our monitor person, and gathering as much multi-tracks as I could. And some of the stuff that's in the documentary was a mono, feed off of a camera. That's all we ended up with. I had to figure out how to make that work in an Atmos environment and make it play next to a song that I have a full, 60 track breakout. Billy's one of the quietest singers on the planet. She has this voice that truly transcends. I think she's a generational artist, and a voice of that will be remembered forever. But she sings so quietly, quieter than anybody. So you have, 20,000 fans screaming louder than she is. You have drums banging behind her. And it's like, if you saw the automation, the work that I had to do to get her vocal out in front of the band and the audience, that was the heavy lifting. And we're talking, in cases, line by line, carving out, re-EQing, reprocessing these things, because she sounds phenomenal. It's just, how do you get everybody else out of the way so you can hear this vocal that's so perfect and sounds like a record every time she sings it, And then again, getting that to play down over the context of an entire documentary with, things that we didn't think about. You aren't thinking back in 2018, 2017, we should make sure we get a great recording of this for the future when we need to do a documentary. Like, that wasn't even like, just weren't even thinking about it. We're just like, oh shoot, now we have to go gather this stuff and see what we can do. So yes, that's the mixing portion of it.
So as a music director, how do you know when you've done an awesome job?
I would say the best version, it's a really interesting question, because it's a conversation I've been having amongst mutual friends we have and just, other friends within this community. The best version of being a music director is handling all the fires that come up so quickly and get them out of the way that everything just comes together and feels flawless to the artist, because at the end of the day, we're there to support them, right? We're doing everything in our possibility to make sure that they have the best possible experience that they can have. So if you make it through a day and everybody, and all the things that happened, but nobody else does, and the artist is happy and the fans love it, and management, the label, and everybody, that's a really good day.
I would love to hear from you, for anyone listening who might want your job, not like the actual gig you're on, but the job of a music director.
Yeah.
What kind of skills or even personal traits would you recommend that anyone needs to be a good MD?
It's so wide reaching now as far as the things that we field as music directors. So I think that being a good player is a big leg up. You know, like being a great performer on your instrument definitely helps. And I know people that don't have that background entirely, and that's totally fine too. But yeah, that has helped me a ton. Being able to grab a guitar and say like, oh, I think it's like this, or piano, and just kind of like play parts and figure it out. Yeah, that's a good baseline thing. I think the tech side of it has become really big, and it's like I can comfortably work in Logic, Pro Tools, and Ableton any day. Like, you know, like the live shows are in Ableton, I produce in Logic, and I spent years in Pro Tools. So it's like, you know, being able to sit down in any situation and feel like you can go at it. And that's just figuring out how to make those things work for you. It's like, if you know one DAW really well, you can usually find ways to say like, well, how do I make this one function like the one that I know? And that's helpful. And then the one that takes longer, I think, is you kind of have to be, unless you start bringing people in, you know, it's like, I really like to curate and do it, like get my hands dirty through the whole thing. Being a decent mixer is pretty important too, because you're talking about music that's going to be played through huge systems, and it's like, is the bass going to be amazing? Like, are kids going to freak out and have a good time, or is it going to be kind of weak? Because these are all things you learn over the years, and there's times when I did a show and I listened back and I was like, needs way more bass, you know, like little things, but it's mix. It's like, what's going to be harsh at 100 dB, you know, like what you know, like all, and that's just trial and error, you know. I think just with everything, it's find a friend and help them out, and start figuring that out. But it is a very eclectic grouping of skills, which is why I think it's a pretty small group of peers that I know that do this with these bigger artists, because you have to be able to produce transitional music. You have to reimagine songs. You have to be able to mix it well enough that the front of house person isn't like, dude, this sounds terrible. Like, I can't even work with this, and we're playing arenas. So yeah, there's a lot of pieces to it. It can be overwhelming if you take it all on at once, but I do think that it's just like piece by piece. You can't learn it all at once, but if you just take pieces of it and keep growing, one day you're like, oh yeah, well now I just know how to approach something. When I see it and hear it that way, you just automatically react and fix it to what it's going to need to be. So
Aaron, thank you so much for joining us. Congrats on the Emmys, and best of luck come the ceremony.
Thanks, man. I just, you know, being nominated is that's the whole thing. Honestly, she's like, that's so shocking. So thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this. And
sure.
Yeah, thank you.
If you are a composer looking to make your mark in film, TV, or visual media, check out our recent Ascap Experience panel sessions on demand, featuring some of today's leading composers for the screen, sharing valuable information and advice. Our panel, entitled What Every Film Composer Needs to Know About the Business, featured composers Joel Beckerman, Siddhartha Khosla, John Powell, and Pinar Toprak. And another panel called Sync Secrets, Insider Tips on Getting Your Music Placed, featured experts who helped demystify the process. You can watch these sessions and more for free at ascapexperience.com. Check them out. Well, that, as they say, is a wrap. Thanks to everyone who made this episode possible. Our special guests, Michael Abels and Aaron Forbes, as well as my teammates, Jennifer Harmon and Eitan Rosenblum, Tiffany Sims for graphic design, Kate Cordova for social media magic, Sam Hollander and Josh Edmondson for our cool theme music, and Benjamin Keynes of SightSense Productions for audio and video editing. Stay safe, everyone. Keep creating. See you soon.